Hi, I'm Vince, and today we're going to go over basic operation in the studio. So to the left of me, I have our Midas console, and in front of me, we've got our big rack full of outboard gear and some of our analog digital conversion stuff. And behind me, we've got the big Studer tape machine. So we're going to go through kind of basic operation of all this stuff, starting with how to power on and off the studio, then going into the overall routing to get audio into the board and then into your computer system or tape machine. And then we're going to go over kind of a deep dive in the mixer topology and how this mixer works, how to make headphone mixes, how to hear things in the room, and how to use the studio. So let's get started. All right, so we're now looking at this bottom rack here. And the first thing we're going to do is just get our laptop plugged in. So you'll see there's kind of an open rack space here. This is meant for a laptop to sit in. And basically there's two cables coming off. The black cable comes off of the Thunderbolt dock that already has all of the audio interface and everything connected to it. This one cable will also power your laptop, so you don't need to plug in anything else except for that one cable. There's an additional cable here that is a white Thunderbolt cable. This is for the UAD satellite devices, so if you have UA stuff and you want additional processing power, you can use those. So I'll plug those both in, and then I'll just slip my laptop into this case here. There is a third cable that's coming off the front of this Thunderbolt dock, and this is intended for you to plug in any hard drive or additional peripheral. If this is the first time you're using Studio or the keyboard's not working for you, you can plug this into the back of the keyboard here, like so, and it will automatically connect. So now that we've got things connected, we can just power this rack on, which we can do right here with this bottom rack unit. In addition, you have the power supplies for this whole big mixing console just to the left. So these are meant typically for redundancy. That's why there's two of them. You only need one of them on. So to do that, I'll just flip this top one. You could also just flip the bottom one if you want, and you'll see the mixer light up. The redundancy is typically used for live shows, but in this case, it's not something that's really necessary. You'll hear and see the mixing board start up, and then you should see the your computer screen come on the main monitor up here. So that will get us basically into this system. The next thing we got to do is step over to the rack and turn on the rest of the equipment to get some audio going. So in front of me, we've got the main rack units for the studio. Now this contains both our USB audio interface as well as a lot of outboard audio effects. So to turn this whole system on, we've got two main power supplies. The top power supply, which is this Musician's Gear power conditioner, powers on the speaker system as well as the audio interface. And it doesn't power on a bunch of stuff that you don't really need unless you're doing analog mixing. So by default, you're probably just going to want to turn this thing on. So you'll see this kick on in just a second. And then the audio interface power is right here. And so you can just power that on with this power button. Now, do keep in mind, if this is the first time that you're using the Studio, you will need to download the drivers for this audio interface. This is the Orion 32 first generation. So to download the drivers, you'll go to the Antelope Audio website and make sure to find the first generation. They have many iterations of the Orion 32, Gen 4, Gen 3, Orion 32 Plus. This is just the original one. You can still find the drivers, but you have to go through their legacy products. Now the rest of this rack gear, some of it being up here and some of it being down here, is all powered on by this secondary power supply here. So we can power that on with this switch. You'll see all this stuff come on, but in general, it's not really needed unless you're at the point where you're doing an analog mix. So I'm gonna leave that off for now. Above the audio interface, you'll see this patch bay. So the patch bay consists of all these tiny telephone patches, and there's patch cables in this drawer right here. Now, a patch cable allows you to take audio from one source and move it to another place. So I'm going to take basically this first channel, and now I've got it in my hand and I can put it anywhere. Typically you want to go from top to bottom, unless there's some weird routing going on. It's not really used in any other way. So there's three ways to set up a patch bay: normaled, non-normaled, and half normaled. And this is set up half normaled, which means that basically the signal will by default flow from top to bottom. And then if you patch into the top, it will still flow from top to bottom, but it will also split and then flow here, so we can patch it to other places in the system. So this allows us to basically split our signal to analog and digital pathways if we wanted to do like a all analog tape recording, for example. So the turning off the system is exactly the same. To do that, you'll just press the power button on the audio interface and then just flip this power off here. And that's it for the rack. So now that we've got everything powered on, you'll see this remote lights up. And this remote allows us to control the volume and signal in the control room. So first off, you've got your main volume right here. I usually like to start with this pretty much all the way down. And then you'll see that the speakers are on channel B. So if you don't hear anything, that's one thing you can check. Make sure this gets on channel B because that's what's actually connected to our speakers. Dim will just turn the volume down 20 decibels. Mute will obviously mute the signal, and mono will make it mono. Now, if you're listening straight off your digital system, just straight off your laptop through the audio interface, you can select digital here. And if you want to listen off the mixing board, you can select TRS-1. So if you wanted to do a completely laptop workflow, you could leave the mixing board totally off if you're just mixing in here, and then have this on digital. If you are listening on the digital input, you're going to need to make sure this is on SPDIF here. One other thing to note is that the TalkBack mic on this unit is actually not used. We have a separate TalkBack on the mixing board that is our preferred system. So let's now go to the computer system and kind of understand what other steps we can take to diagnose if you don't have sound coming through the system. So at this point, you should be able to pump audio through the room from your laptop. If you're having trouble with that, a couple of things to check. First off, did you install the driver for the Orion 32? And did that installation process work? I believe on Mac, you have to enable like a security thing, so it can be a little bit tricky. So make sure to follow all the steps that are outlined in the driver install. The second thing is to make sure that the Orion 32 is actually selected as your output device. And this tracks for both Mac and Windows. So you can go into your sound settings and it'll show output device, and just make sure Orion 32 is the one that's selected. When you're playing back audio, you can also look at the actual unit, the Orion 32 unit, and you'll see like a meter bar show signal if there's actually signal going through the unit. The other things to check are basically what I talked about on the central station, making sure the volume's actually up, things aren't muted, the speakers are selected correctly. So hopefully that gets some sound for you, and we'll move on to the next steps.